This week, we are doing something special. I'm doing a collaboration with Tom from Adventuring Addicts. This will be more of a partial tutorial. One of the ideas behind the channel is to spark creativity. Most of what I do here, I've never done before. I figure it out as I go. So when Tom contacted me about making something in theme, I was up for it. The theme was to make an encounter at sea. I would make the creature and he would make the ship to fight him on. At first, I wanted to make a Kraken. I figured it fit the theme and I could find a way to use it for the upcoming adventures of Ghost of Saltmarsh. Eventually, Tom got me thinking about making a Cthulhu-like creature. I figured I'd make a miniature that would play both roles. So this is what I came up with. For this video, I mainly wanted to concentrate on making the head. I also talk about techniques from old videos and how to apply them to making Cthulhu. Don't forget to subscribe and let's get right into it. I wanted to start off with the head and then decide how big I'd like to make the body. Like always, I like to build the foundation for the sculpt out of aluminum. I make his face tentacles out of wire, hot glue, and aluminum. I try to give the wire some type of curvature before I wrap it up with aluminum. I use hot glue to completely cover them, with the exception of a small area where only the wire is exposed. We'll use that to pin it to the face. I ended up going with 6 tentacles for his face. I make sure to put a good amount of hot glue on all the joints. I use pearl beads for the eyes. While working on the face, I took inspiration from Bloodborne, which was inspired by Lovecraft. I knew I didn't want to give it just 2 eyes, so I gave it 5. I started in skewers for the fins on his head. You can use the same techniques from the sea serpent's tail. I also add another ball of aluminum to extend his head. I want to make sure it looks like an octopus. I then continue the fin design all the way up the head. This is where I finish pinning the last 2 tentacles. After that, I just cover most of the face with clay with the exception of the spikes and the eyes. For me, this is the fun part, the facial features. Although, this will be simple, we'll just make him look angry. Roll up small strings of clay. Make sure to add water to the face so that the clay can stick to it easier. And also, blend away from the pearl beads. I tend to not use sculpting tools simply because I get really into it and I forget. But I would advise you use them when working on small details like this. Make things easier for yourself. Don't be a Franky. The chest is a piece of pink foam wrapped with aluminum. I add a layer of hot glue to the edges of the aluminum. I do the same thing with a smaller piece and use that as the neck. Whenever I need to glue anything to the body, I make sure to pin it by using hot glue and skewers. I add more mass to the back by rolling up aluminum and hot gluing it right in. I try to mimic back muscles as well as I can. And for all these joints, don't forget to fill in the gaps. I get the cylinder-shaped building blocks and I get to building. I attach them using toothpicks and hot glue. I use 2 cylinders for the biceps and 2 cylinders for the forearms. For the forearms, I make sure to trim off the ends. The thing about these building blocks is that they're pretty tough. The hot glue won't melt through them. Since the blocks are so tough, I advise you make all cuts prior to gluing them to the body. When pinning them, I go back between 1 and 2 toothpicks. That was just one arm. Let's speed through the second one. For the hands, I'll simply roll up a ball of aluminum and make it as compact as possible. This is where we'll start to recycle ideas, like the hands for the Forest Guardian. At the core of the fingers, I use wire. I use a little bit of crazy glue and baking soda to fortify them. I then wrap them up in aluminum and hot glue them to finish them off. The number one reason I made the video for the winged beast was to make sure you had something to reference when you eventually made the wings for Cthulhu. So if you would like to have just the Kraken, you don't have to add the wings. But if you would like to add the wings, all you have to do is scale the measurements from the winged beast tutorial. You can use craft sticks instead of skewers. Let me just test out these wings, the Franky way. Using those same crafting sticks, we're gonna add collarbones. I wanted to add some bulk to the sculpture without adding too much weight to it. I think the best way to do this before I add clay to it is to add paper mache. The only thing was that I had to let this dry for a whole 24 hours, but when it dried very solid. I made sure to use the paper towel on this section of the back. I actually really like the way the texture looks. I have used this in other tutorials for the same reason. Another way to add bulk without adding much weight is by adding rolled up aluminum. I try to condense it as much as possible and use hot glue to attach it to the body. The idea here is to mimic the shape of the muscles so that you don't have to do much work when it comes to sculpting the clay. For the tentacles, I use wire, foam board, and aluminum just to get me started. I pinned the wire through a small piece of foam board. Use hot glue to cover where you pinned the wire. Allow that to completely cool before continuing. Slowly bend the wire and hot glue the foam to it. After the hot glue dries, add another layer to the tentacles. I then add more bulk to the tentacles by adding aluminum. And here I just add another layer of hot glue. I'm skipping ahead here. I think it's better to finish the tentacles completely before gluing them to the body. To continue the design on the back along the tentacles, we are going to use PVA glue and water to soak the paper towel from earlier and fully cover the tentacles. When doing this, I have found out that it's better to do one layer at a time. It dries faster, but it also seems stronger. Even if you decide to add another layer of paper mache after the first one dries, you're still saving time. Again, do this before you glue them to the body. It's as simple as adding hot glue and running 2 lines of small beads down the tentacles. That's it. No crazy tricks. Make sure to add a little bit of hot glue when you're done. This was by far the most frustrating part of the whole project. So remember to do it before you glue it. Don't be a Franky. All I have left to do for this half of the tutorial is glue the tentacles on Cthulhu. I'm not sure if I went overboard when gluing this, because when I pinned it, I felt like the wire wasn't long enough, so when I hot glued the tentacles, I made sure to put a lot of hot glue. And then, on top of that, I added paper mache to it. Hope you are enjoying the tutorial so far. Stay tuned for the second part of the tutorial, where I show you how to craft the Triton. I also go over Cthulhu's workout plan and how you can craft your own six-pack in only one 5-minute workout. Summer's coming. Is your Cthulhu beach body ready for a death battle at sea? No? I didn't think so. Keep an eye out for part 2, but in the meantime, check out Adventuring Addicts' video on his build. You're gonna need a bigger boat.